Hey, this is MotoPat. Here are my top 13 tips for long distance riding on a motorcycle. I've been riding long distance since 2007 when I set my sights on Prudhoe Bay, Alaska. It was my longest and best trip where I managed 12,000 miles in just 23 days round trip from Knoxville, Tennessee. I learned a lot on that trip and more since then. So here we go. I'm going to break this down into a couple different categories. Number one, prepping your bike. Number two, what gear you should have, and then advice for you as a rider. So first, prepping your bike. Tires are like teeth. If you don't take care of them, they won't take care of you. Remember, your rear tire wears much faster than the front because that's where all the driving force is coming from. And so you need to be checking your air pressure. But most of all, before a long trip, you got to make sure you've got enough rubber to get you where you're going and back. The second thing is the seat. It may not seem so obvious, but if you've not done a lot of long distance, the seat is really, really important. Most stock motorcycle seats are terrible. And so many of us that do long distance riding choose aftermarket seats. I prefer the Russell Daylong saddle, and Sargent seats are pretty good too, but the Russell Daylong is the ultimate. If you don't have the money to get a fancy aftermarket seat, you should really think about some compression shorts or bike shorts. That will really help you and ease your pain as you ride. You really need to understand what the fuel range is of your bike. I have two bikes. The first one is out west, and that's my Super Tenere, which holds 6 gallons of fuel total. The bike at home here in Knoxville is a big BMW that holds 8.7 gallons of fuel. You need to understand well before you leave on a big long trip how far can you go in a tank of gas, and whether or not you need to bring extra fuel with you for the trip. Navigation is really important. GPS always works, and so I really enjoy GPS, even though most riders have switched entirely to using their phones. But frankly, out west, if you get way out west, you will find many areas where there is no cell service, and that's where GPS will always work. Google Maps on the phone is my absolute best way I've found to navigate, especially if you engage the traffic feature. Also, I use a weather app that has radar so I can actually see cells as I'm riding towards them or away from them. This is really helpful. And this is old school, but I love paper maps. When you stop to eat, it's really good to sort of find the added scale of a paper map to see how far you're going, where you might get to, where your next fuel is likely to be, stuff like that. It's just better. The tiny screens in our phones and GPS is just not the same as a paper map. And remember, as you plan your route, figure how much time you'll need for yourself. Like, what is your range per day? You need to know how many miles the bike can go on a tank of gas, but you need to also know your range and your limits. And remember, those limits are different for dry versus wet. So if you're in the rain, you're not going to be able to travel the same distance you would in the dry. Next up is the gear that you wear. It's very, very important. I recommend a full face helmet always, a riding jacket, real motorcycle boots, and a legit rain suit. This is so important to have these things. I use either earplugs or earbuds, and my bike has heated grips, but I also bring a heated vest. And it's surprising, if you get in the rain and you're traveling 70, 80 miles an hour, you can get really cold really fast, and a heated vest is very handy. I also carry 4 pairs of gloves on most trips. Once you get a pair wet, they're really worthless until you get them dry again. And so you can kind of keep changing gloves until you run out, and then you really got to stop. And finally, advice for you as a rider. You need to stop often, at least every 100, 125 miles. Make sure to put sunscreen on your nose. Even if you have a tinted visor that's built in your helmet, your nose is going to be exposed, so be careful with that. Remember that you will lose hydration radically fast in the wind, and you're always in the wind on a bike. If it's especially hot, you will really lose a lot of hydration, so make sure you drink a lot. I find it works better to eat smaller meals more often on big trips. So my favorite is, Jack in the Box, 2 tacos and a drink, and I'm gone. Try not to pack too much. Just t-shirts is all you need. Make sure you bring a pair of sandals or comfortable shoes so that you don't have to wear your boots all the time when you're not on the bike. I recommend Aleeve just for muscles and aches and pains. By day 3 or 4 of a long ride, it really catches up to you and it hurts. Make sure you make a shakedown ride. before you go on your big trip. Don't kind of just think you have it all down and then just take off for a couple weeks on the road. Do an overnight trip where you ride a lot of miles in 2 days and then come back home again, and then you can adjust the bike or your kit as needed. Last, make sure that you are aware of what your insurance company is willing to do for you in terms of a tow or whatever. And before a big trip might be a really good time to increase your coverage for a towing and assist. So that's a really good idea to do. You can always change it when you get home. And that's it for my 13 tips for long distance motorcycle riding. Please like and subscribe if you found this useful. Thanks, I'm MotoPat. We'll see you on the road.